We are live.
We are live. Okay, let's just give it a minute for everybody to join in and we can begin.
Pri, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. All right, it's 2:30. Let's begin. Start with sharing my screen. There we go. All right, is that visible? Hope that's visible. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is our very first webinar for APAC at Deel. For today's webinar, we're going to be talking about building a business beyond borders and how to hire international talent. Following that, we're going to dive deep into how we can enable our viewers today and Indian companies hire in the UAE and Europe. All right, so who's in the room today? We have Karen. She is our regional head of expansion and market lead for Singapore, ASEAN, Hong Kong, and India. Next, we have Tarek, who is our head of expansion, Middle East, North Africa, and also the country manager for UAE. We have Selene. She is our senior legal advisor in the French zone, and all things compliance, she's an expert. Next, we have Yonit. She is the employee experience specialist for us at Deel for the UAE, Israel, Egypt, Morocco, and a couple of other countries as well. And finally, there's me. I am Pri. I will be moderating today's webinar, and I handle mid-market and enterprise sales for Deel in India. So what's on the agenda today? Today, we will first be talking about introduction to global hiring and how we can hire international talent. Karen will be talking on these topics for us today. Following that, we'll dive deep into the details of hiring in the UAE and what this looks like. We have Tarek and Yonit who are going to be speaking on this topic. Then we have hiring in France, a deep dive. Selene will be talking to us about this. Finally, we'll have a very quick overview of the Deel platform, followed by a Q&A. Please feel free to put all your questions in the Q&A. We will answer as many questions as we can and address all your pressing questions. All right, so today's session, I want to begin with a very quick video, under a minute. This video is going to give you a very high-level context on global hiring, the problems involved, and what exactly is the role of a company like Deel in this. So please, let's have a look.
Every so often, there's a moment that changes everything. You're on mute. The saying goes, disruption either happens to you or because of you. We're for the people making the most of this moment, not just working from home, but working anywhere, better, smarter, faster. They've figured out how to work here and hire her and him and them and whoever the best damn person for the job is, wherever they happen to be. Wait, she's British? Your business will need a local office and a bank to pay in pounds? Tax laws, HR laws, more laws, new laws. Thought you had it under control. Relax. With just a few clicks, it's all no big deal. Which is kind of a big deal.
All right, so
Every so often,
that was the video. Let's move on to the next slide. Business beyond borders. So we have Karen here to talk to us about this. Karen, you've been with Deel for several quarters, and every single day you speak to numerous clients all over the world, especially in APAC. And the one thing that's very clear is clients are increasingly looking to build a global workforce. So today, can you please talk to our audience regarding the reasons behind this and why companies are looking to build a business without borders.
Thank you, Pri. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to talk to our audience. Yes, indeed. So I'm happy to share 3 findings that we found at Deel, right? So why is remote work so prominent today? So 3 things, really. So remote work has been proven that it can be done and it is here to stay. So that's the norm. Second is talent shortage. We've just launched in many of our countries, including Singapore and Hong Kong in this region just in the last month. And that's a prominent topic, right? Talent shortage. Where do I find the best people? One of the things I read just recently was a job description on LinkedIn that was talking about more the time zone rather than the location, right? So I think businesses these days are really looking at the best talent wherever they are. And of course, globalization, right? So as it says very clearly here on your slide, location shouldn't stand in the way of people getting a job. I think these are really the 3 key takeaways why companies, and in particular as well, Indian companies, considering global hiring.
Thank you, Karen. Absolutely agree with everything that you said there. So now that we've spoken about the significance of international hiring, let's focus a little bit on the how. How do we engage international candidates? So there are 2 different directions that we can take broadly. One is you identify a candidate in a different continent, in a different country. You can engage this person as an independent contractor or as a consultant. Here, someone like a Deel will streamline the entire process for you, taking care of the compliance, making sure everything you're doing in that country is compliant and in line with the local labor laws, managing payroll for this contractor, managing this international contractor or team member, that is managing their expenses, their time off, deploying assets to them, automating their invoices, and finally, overall, just mitigating misclassification risk for you. Now, the second direction that you can take is when you identify someone in a different part of the world and you want to engage this individual as a full-time employee. And in countries and regions where you don't have your own entities, you can do this with someone like Deel through the employer of record model. Karen, for those who don't know the employer of record model, could you please explain what this is, how it works, and is it popular in today's global workforce?
Absolutely, Pri. So that is really a jargon that we use, right? So we expect everyone to understand EOR. But actually, in a nutshell, what it is, right? In very simple words, how I would explain it to my little niece is, so any companies that want to hire someone where they do not have a legal entity yet, or they're not planning to have a legal entity, this is where they can use the global, just 1 minute, my screen. The employment of record scenario, right? So this is basically how it works. So the EOR provider, so for example, Deel, will be taking care of everything. So in terms of the compliance, in terms of if there's a visa needed for that person in the country where the companies do not have a legal entity.
Got it. All right. So from what you've just explained, it seems like the employer of record, or Deel in our case, takes care of the employee. So in this scenario, what is the level of ownership does the client have?
Yes. So as you can see here on the slides that you've clearly mentioned, Pri, so the EOR will handle all the legal responsibility, right, around the employee, and our colleague Solan can probably expand on this a little bit later. Compliance, onboarding, payroll, and benefits, but also as well offboarding, right, in scenarios where the employee is transitioning out. And then, of course, the day-to-day relationship, the IP ownership access to global workforce is also part of what an employment of record would handle.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that, Karen. Next, since we've spoken about the 2 models, it is absolutely important to understand the key differences between the two models for you to be able to take the best decision as to whether you want to engage an individual as a contractor or as an employee, and also mitigate yourself from misclassification. So, Karen, for those who don't know, if you can just explain misclassification and also just broadly tell us what are some factors that should be thought of before you make a decision on hiring someone as a contractor or as an employee.
Yes, absolutely, Pri. Misclassification is really something that is a topic, right, these days, especially when we talk to companies working with a lot of contractors, right? So in a lot of cases, when we talk to companies, for example, in India, to HR professionals, one key thing they ask is, oh, we are working with a lot of contractors in different countries. We've heard of misclassification, but we don't really understand what it is, right?
Right.
And this is exactly, so the way we explain misclassification is, for example, as a consultant, depending on countries, you are not able to, or you're not supposed to be working for the same company for X amount of time. If not, at a certain point, you might basically be considered as a full-time employee, right? And as a full-time employee, statutory funds and everything would be mandatory at this point in time. So this is where Deel can actually help in understanding, right, and navigating the different misclassification risks that you may have. Now the difference, as you said, right, so the difference between an individual contractor and an employee. So a few things here that we want to mention, right, that you want to look at. So the business relationship, right, so the taxes, the mandatory benefits that is associated with being a contractor or an employee, compensation, and of course, the method of how you get paid, right? So that's basically how it works.
Got it. Thank you, Karen. Now that we've spoken about the international candidate, let's talk a little bit about the international market. Karen, if you, in your opinion, could tell us what are some things that should be thought of before making a decision to enter a new market, what should be the evaluation criteria?
Sure. Just give me 1 second, Pri. I think my screen is, I can't actually see you anymore.
No worries, these things happen. Take your time.
I mean, we are live, right? So that's what happened. So, okay, I'm back. Yes, so I would like to share a little bit. That's a very good question, Pri, that you mentioned. I would like to share a little bit of roadmap, right, that we often give to customers. So basically, we've come up, right, with those key steps. So one is to evaluate, right? So are you ready to hire internationals? So is there a business need, right? So for example, it could be, yes, we've identified, for example, Vietnam to be a good market for us, right? But we're not sure yet, right? So at the same time, so we also are not sure about if we want to fully go there at this point. So go to market, right? So evaluate.
Right.
Second is, of course, you decide who to hire and where to hire, right? So again, going back to the example I gave earlier about the job description stating, okay, you can be based anywhere as long as you fit this time zone, right? So that's also, right? Do you need a language skill? Do you need this person to work a particular time, right? For your business. And of course, decide how much to pay, right? So for example, today I'm paying my sales manager in India X. Do I pay the same salary for someone who I'm going to hire in Vietnam, right? So these are the things that you should put in place. And then of course, after you've decided all of this, then you will hire. So then, right, so you're like, okay, fine, right? You've given us a roadmap. Now, how? So that's exactly what we wanted to share is, so we've put together, right, some tools that are available to a lot of businesses, right, around all of those questions, right, to actually guide. So one is the Global Salary Insights, right? So again, how much should a software engineer these days be getting in Vietnam compared to Thailand, right? What the global employment comparison. So what are the factors I need to consider when I employ someone in Vietnam or when I employ someone in Thailand, right? And how much is it going to cost me, right? So statutory funds differ, right, from countries to countries. So this is where you can use our employee cost calculator, and in the end, as well. So we look a lot after the employee, we care a lot about the employee or the contractor. So as an employee in Vietnam, so let's say, right, we're transitioning you from India to Hong Kong. So how much will Pri be making, right?
Right.
Being based in another country, right? So really no more double guessing, right? So that's why these tools are freely available to businesses alongside the roadmap that we normally share.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Karen, for answering all our questions. That was very, very helpful. And we'll see you again at the end during our Q&A. All right, so now I would like to share some data which we've gathered here at Deel. This is data that has been gathered from more than 100,000 work contracts in over 150 plus countries, along with 500,000 third-party data points. And the reason for sharing this today is to really help all of you understand the breakdown of what exactly is happening with the global job landscape. So let's have a quick look at the top roles hired by region through Deel. So as you can see, software engineer continues to be the #1 role hired for across all regions. And then we have account executives, customer support executives, virtual assistants, etc. So really the conclusion that we can gather from this is there is a tech talent shortage globally, and predominantly tech roles are the roles that most of our clients are looking for when they're looking for talent outside of their respective countries. Next, we'll look at what are the top 5 roles that Indian companies are hiring for outside of India. And here, once again, we have software engineer, we have software developer, we have business development roles, we have proposal managers and sourcing managers. Once again, what we can really tell from this is Indian clients are increasingly looking for tech talent outside of India, since there is a shortage very much in India as well. And a lot of the Indian companies and clients have rapid plans to expand into other regions, for which they are looking to hire local business development and sales executives in different countries. All right, and finally talking about what are the most popular regions that Indian businesses are hiring from. And based on our data, we see that most of our Indian clients are hiring from the UAE, Europe, USA, and Canada. And since the UAE and Europe are at the top of our list, this is why we thought for our very first webinar, we would dive deep into details on hiring in the UAE and hiring in Europe, and all of you would benefit from it. So first, we'll talk in detail about hiring in the UAE. For this, we have Tariq and Yonit who will be joining us and walking us through the different slides. All right, so Tariq, my first question for you is to really kickstart this whole conversation by telling us a little bit about why the UAE is such a hotspot for international talent, and what are the biggest reasons for clients to be looking into hiring in the UAE?
Thank you, Pri, and Karen. Thank you for that introduction as well. I learned a few things from you as well from what you just mentioned. Taking a step back from all the compliance and everything, which is what we solve for you guys, and you don't have to worry about that. It's always very important to identify where you want to set up, or where you want to tackle, or what market you want to grow into next. And this is exactly why the UAE has been very popular today in terms of becoming a regional base for companies that want to scale either into the APAC or into European or into the US markets, right? So the UAE has been very forward thinking when it comes to positioning itself as a landing and a launch pad for growth into multiple markets, right? So that's why it's a melting pot of many cultures that come together, and there's a lot of growth opportunities, not just within the UAE itself, but using the UAE as a launch pad for many other markets to access, right? That's the whole point of how it's gotten to where it is today. And this is how we're supporting a lot of our clients from around the world to get into the UAE, but also a lot of our clients from the UAE to access other markets, right? Also from a corporate perspective, or from an income tax perspective, it's one of the best places to be in. yet alone the quality of life that you can get through, whether it's for yourself or your families, whether it's the healthcare, whether it's the schoolings, and just being able to roam around. I've been here for 31 years. I'm Lebanese actually, but my family's been here for decades now. So this is what we call home. It's one of the best places that you can come through, plug in, connect with so many people, and also from an opportunity perspective, it's one of the booming places. You've seen how they've reacted to the crisis that we've all been through over the past couple of years, when through COVID. They're very advanced in how they're processing things and new policies that they're kicking into place. The government themselves are phenomenal. Everything that they do is for the people and for the people that are residing in the UAE, which is why it's becoming even a more prominent destination for remote work in general, right? Now, when you're looking on a global scale, whether it's comparing here to New York or to Paris or to Miami, Dubai is where it's at. Everyone's trying to get into Dubai. Everyone's trying to be in the UAE in general. And this is exactly why we positioned ourselves as UAE to be one of the critical markets for us to operate in. It's because of the government themselves. And this is leading to what we've announced last week. We announced the partnership with the Ministry of AI and Remote Work Applications. The fact that they have a ministry for AI and remote work applications gives you an insight to how they operate and how forward thinking they are. And this is exactly what Deel is. So we're aligned with their visions. We're aligned with attracting talent to the UAE, attracting companies that want to be based in the UAE so that they can grow better, so they can be based here, so they can make more opportunities and tackle other markets from here. So that's the whole point. This is the gateway. It's not only the regional gateway, it's becoming a gateway for the rest of the world. And now, especially with platforms like Deel, and this is exactly what we try to solve and try to help you so that you guys can scale quick without having to worry about the headaches. So moving on to the next slide, I'll just talk about more on what we're doing here with the UAE. So we've partnered with a few ministries. You'll hear more about what's coming next, but the whole point is, for the past few years, we've been hearing that the UAE wants to attract more and more talent. And because Deel talent for us is at the core of everything that we do, and the success of our clients is at the core of everything that we do, because they come hand in hand. So they saw the value in Deel, and that's exactly why we've partnered up with the government directly, so that we can process and support our clients that are trying to access the UAE, so that they can call UAE home, right? That's the whole point that's our mission. We're bridging the gap for talent to be able to flow easily anywhere that they want to, and this is exactly what we're supporting them with. So on a technical perspective or an operational perspective, they continuously launched new type of visas, which are supporting talent that wants to relocate to the UAE, especially from a remote perspective. Given, I'm sure a lot of you have heard, or I'm sure a lot of you have been into the UAE recently, but they have new initiatives such as the Golden Visa route. This is a new 10-year visa, which is more sustainable than the standard visa route, because the standard visa route is normally on a 3-year perspective, and we'll cover that in a second. But the whole point is because they want people to be calling this place as home, right? So they want them to be very comfortable and think on the long term, bring their families through, and this is exactly what we're supporting them with. And the government partnership that we've announced and what we're building on is just the first phase of what we're doing. We're bringing through so much value to you to help you position yourself into the UAE so that you can grow quicker. That's the whole point.
Great. Thank you, Tarek. Thank you. Thank you for touching upon our partnership with the UAE government and everything else which gave us such a holistic understanding of UAE as a region. Next, we'll move on to talk about the mandatory benefits in the UAE. Yonit, I would love for you to share your expertise on this. So we see that in the UAE, private health insurance and gratuity are mandatory benefits. If you can help our audience understand how we're currently supporting our employees with private health insurance in the UAE, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Pri. I'm happy to share with you my knowledge about the UAE. So let's start with health insurance in the UAE. So first, it is important to note that the health insurance plan is mandatory and complies with local health insurance regulations in the UAE. The health insurance is linked to the visa, and it is one of the steps in the visa application. We currently have one plan to choose from, and you will cover 100% of the cost of this plan for the employee. For dependents, it is optional. The employer can choose to cover, not to cover at all, to cover 50% or to cover 100% of the cost of the dependents. In case of the employee is covering part of the cost, it will be deducted from his salary. Also, it is important to note that the cost is yearly. It is not a monthly cost, and it is calculated in the local currency. Deel has partnered with Abu Dhabi National Insurance Company, also known as ADNIC, to cover the Gold Network plan for our employees. ADNIC, I have to say, is one of UAE's largest private health insurers, and our plan offers coverage with private hospital accommodation, physiotherapy benefits, dental coverage. This plan really has a wide provider network that offers coverage at top hospitals and clinics across the UAE. So once the employee receives the residence visa and the Emirates ID is issued, the coverage goes live. And when an employee is terminated and the residence visa is canceled, the coverage is canceled as well. Although the employer can grant the employee with a few more days of coverage, just to be, on the safe side if any medical issue occurs, so the employee will be covered. The plan costs are based on the employee's age, gender, and marital status. So, for example, the cost of insurance for a married woman will be higher than a cost of a single woman. And this is due to maternity medical checks in pregnancy. In any case, we can share with you a one-pager about this plan after the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Yonit. That was great and gave us very detailed information on private health insurance. The other mandatory benefit that we see in the UAE is gratuity. So could you just walk us through how this is calculated and collected from the employer?
Yes, of course. So the end of service benefits are a statutory monetary entitlement that employees must receive from the employers when the employment contract is terminated. So one of the end of service payment is gratuity pay. In fact, the employee must complete 1 year of service to be eligible to the gratuity payment. So this means that an employee who has been employed for less than 1 year is not entitled to this gratuity payment. So for service of more than 1 year, but less than 5 years, the full gratuity pay would be an amount of 21 days of salary for every year of service. So for example, if the employee has worked for 4 years in a company, the gratuity will be 21 days of salary multiplied by 4. If an employee has served more than 5 years, so they will be entitled to a full gratuity payment of 30 days for each year of work following the first 5 years, and I will explain. So if the employee worked for 7 years, he will be paid for the first 5 years the 21 day of gratuity, and the difference of the year, which means between the 5 years and the 7, we have 2 years. In these 2 years, you will be eligible for 30 days of gratuity. So as I mentioned, as in the first year, we don't pay gratuity in case of termination. However, it is important to note that from the 11th month of employment, we will start accruing and charging the gratuity payment. So from the start date of the employee. So in case of termination, after the first year, this will be covered. So as I said, it will be backdated to the employee's start date. So on the 11th month, you will be charged, you will be invoiced for the gratuity for those 11 months. And starting from the 12th month, the monthly cost of the gratuity will be added to the employer cost.
Understood. Thank you, Yonit. Thank you for that. Next, we'll touch a little bit upon the termination process, how it works in the UAE, and also what are the employer costs associated with expats, since like we discussed, most people employed in the UAE through the employer of record model happen to be expats. So Yonit, take it away and give us a brief on how clients can terminate an employee and how they can go about this process, and also the employer costs.
Okay, sure. So I will start with the termination. So first, when we speak about termination, we also have the case of resignation by the employee. In both cases, either party can terminate the contract for any legitimate reason, provided that the other party is notified in writing, and work should be performed during the notice period, and the notice period should be agreed by both sides. So in our contract, we have probation period. So during the probation period, the notice period will be 14 days. And after the probation period, it's 1 month. So in both cases of resignation or termination, there should be a written email by the employee if it's a resignation, or by the employer if it's termination, with the last working day mentioned. However, in case of termination that is coming from the employer, from the client, I strongly recommend to reach out to the customer success manager that will be in contact with you for guidance, and I will speak about it in a minute. If the employment contract is terminated by the employer, the employee will have the right to be absent during the notice period for 1 working day per week without pay. And why is that? This is to give the employee the opportunity to search for another job. Also, it is more worth mentioning in this case that the employee should update the employer 3 days before he's using this day. So when we request a termination in our platform, you should mention that what is the reason for terminating the agreement, and to update if the employee was notified about the termination. Our legal team will review each case separately, and the customer success manager will be in contact with you and will assist you with the process. Again, I strongly suggest to contact us before terminating the agreement to receive the best guidance on the steps of termination, because this can easily escalate, and we want to ensure that we follow the UAE regulations. So again, in any termination, reach out to the customer success manager. Our legal team will review it and will assist you with the process. One last thing that is important to note about termination is that once the visa is cancelled, the employee will have 28 days of grace period to get a new visa or to leave the country. And this is basically the part about termination. Do you want me to move forward to the employer cost directly?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see in the slide, there are a few employer costs for foreign employees. So the costs are visa, the health, and gratuity that we already mentioned. So when we speak about the visa, we have 2 types of visa. If it's a golden visa, so the cost will be every 10 years. And if it's a standard visa, the cost will be every 3 years, because you need to renew the visa. So as you can see, the cost, the standard visa is around 6,500, but it's not including additional government fee. So it is an estimated cost of 6,500 dirhams. And for the golden visa as well, 8,000 dirham, again, not including any additional government fees. The health insurance that I mentioned earlier is also part of the employer cost. And again, it depends on the age, the gender, and the marital status. The cost is yearly. So every year we must renew the health insurance. The third cost, as I mentioned, is a gratuity. So we will start invoicing from the 11th month of employment. Again, it will be invoiced for the first 11 months, and for the 12th months of employment, it will be a monthly cost. Again, it depends on the basic salary of the employee.
Great. Thank you, Yonit. Thank you for walking us through that. Finally, let's finish it off by talking about onboarding in the UAE. Onboarding in the UAE, not just the UAE, but most countries in Deel is a very, very quick process. It's not time consuming, it's quite seamless. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like in the UAE. Yonit, if you could just give us a high level overview of what the onboarding process looks like and what are the typical requirements from an employee standpoint. We will end this conversation on UAE with that.
Okay, perfect. So in order to start the visa process, we will need a few documents, as you can see here. A passport. We will need also a photo following the UAE specifications. We will need CV in English. We will need the employment information. We will have to know if they are currently holding a UAE permit. We need the evidence of cancellation of the current permit. In some cases, we need an attested degree, as written here. If they have family members, we need their marriage records attested and birth records attested as well in case of children. In any case of onboarding, our global mobility team will review the documents of each employee and will guide him through the process. So global mobility will reach out to the employee. They will explain everything about the process, because every employee needs different documents. So global mobility team will review each case separately and will handle it directly with the employee and with the UAE authorities. And I think that this includes everything for now.
Great. Thank you, Yonit. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Next, we will move on to talking about hiring in Europe. This is another request that comes up a lot for us. And since Europe is a big region and it has several countries, we thought for our first webinar, we would dive deep into one of the countries which keeps coming up the most, and that would be France. So in today's webinar, we'll dive deep into what hiring in France looks like, the compliances, and the intricacies. So for this, as I mentioned earlier, we have Selene. She's our senior legal advisor here in the French zone and an absolute expert on everything compliance in France. Thank you, Selene, for being here with us. So first, to begin with, just want to know from you, in your opinion, why is France a talent pool for international talent, and why are clients looking to hire from France?
Hello, Pri. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you. So to answer your question, in fact, we can underline the quality of research and development staff in France. We have a very good level of education and very good engineer profile. That's why I think it's a good idea to come in France.
Great. So some very good engineering profiles, as you mentioned, then that's a good point to note. The next thing I would like to understand is what are the factors that should be considered or evaluated before making a decision to hire an employee in France?
Yeah, so I think we can mention two points. The first thing is that you have to see if you want to hire someone for a fixed-term contract or an indefinite term contract. So it's really necessary to evaluate the mission of the employee, because breach of contract in France is not the same under fixed-term contract or indefinite term contract, and it's not so easy after probation period to breach a contract when the contract is indefinite one. So it's the first thing to see, and then it's the statutory of the employee, because there is a difference between CAD, the name of France is CAD, it's autonomy employee, executive employee, because their working time are in days and not in hours. And so it's very important, because if they are CAD, we don't pay overtime, which is not the same for the other employee.
Right, noted. Thank you. Let's move on. So, Selene, mandatory benefits in France, it's right in front of us on the screen. But if you could just walk us through each of these and give us a high-level understanding, that would be very useful.
Yes, Pri. So, in fact, we have very good social security scheme in France because probably you know that we are a welfare state. So, regarding that, we pay a lot of social charges, to be honest. But at the same time, all the social charges cover disease, retirement, employment insurance, housing benefits for some category of employees, and family allowance. So that's why it's very. We have very good system, and social security scheme can cover a lot of doctor visits, medicine. When we go to hospital, almost all the fees are covered by our social security scheme.
Great. All right. Do you want to touch upon the others?
Yes, so we can also underline the fact that in France we have very good also scheme of health insurance because private company must cover the employee with a mutual insurance scheme. In that case, the employer must pay at least 50% of the contribution cost, and the employee must also pay the remaining 50%. So if you wish an example, for instance, in Deel, we use a specific insurance called Alan, and the cost is 32 euro for the employer and 42 euro for the employee. And as mentioned before, also for the dependents, it's optional. Not for the employee because it's mandatory for the employee, but it's optional for the dependents. Do you want that I explain employment insurance?
Yeah, sure. If you want to, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks to social contribution, employees are covered by employment insurance. The maximum it's 2 years, and during 2 years, the employee will receive 50% of his last salary. The employee needs to contribute before 6 months, during 6 months to receive it. So if he contributes during 6 months, he will receive 6 months. If it's pay for 8 months, he will receive 8 months unemployment benefit. So the system, it's one time again, it's a very welfare system scheme.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Thank you, Selene. Next, we'll talk a little bit about how income tax is calculated. We have the rates on the screen, but if you could just give us a very quick understanding of how this works.
Yes. So the income tax scale is used to calculate tax. As you see, there are several brackets, each with a different tax rate. Of course, when your salary is very high, for France, 160,000 euro is very high, your income tax will be 45%. But as mentioned before, because the state pay a lot of things in the counterpart is this rate of income tax, to be honest.
Right. So because France is a welfare state, it also translates into higher income tax rates.
Exactly. Exactly.
Understood. Very interesting. All right. So next we have termination and severance pay in France. I understand from my conversations around France that termination in France is not very straightforward. So Selene, if you could just touch on how this works, how severance pay is calculated, that would be quite useful for some of our clients.
Yeah, so in fact, as mentioned before, we have definite term contract. When we have a definite term contract, the end is very easy because it's the end date written in the contract. So nothing special. You don't have to pay anything, and the contract will have an end on this date. So nothing very specific. For an indefinite term contract, it's more complicated. During the probation period, it's very easy to breach a contract because you just need to follow a very short notice period, but you don't have to give any cause, any justification to breach this contract, and you don't have to pay any severance indemnity. I would like to underline the fact that for a CAD employee, so executive employee, the probation period is 4 months, renewable one time for 4 months. So in fact, it's very long to test the proficiency, competency of your employee. So during this period, it's very easy to breach a contract. After the probation period, it's more complicated. So we have two ways to breach a contract. Either we can breach a contract with a dismissal procedure. In that case, we need a specific cause, justification, and we need to follow a specific procedure and pay a long notice period between 2 or 3 months. Now, quite often, we find a mutual agreement with the employee. It's faster, and at the same time, it's safer for the employer, because with a mutual agreement, we don't have any litigation after. So now in France, we do that quite often. I mean, probably around 70% of the time. And thanks to this mutual agreement with this unofficial procedure in France, the employee will receive an employment benefit as well. I would like to mention that in the two cases, dismissal or mutual agreement, the employer has to pay a minimum severance indemnity, and this minimum is a quarter of a month's salary until 2 years of seniority.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you for the details on that. Very useful. Next, we can touch upon the employer costs in France. If you could just give us an example and help us understand how this is calculated.
Yeah, so as mentioned, we pay contribution on our salary. This contribution, as mentioned, cover retirement, sick leave, employment insurance, etc., etc. So the amount of employees' payroll tax is 22% of gross salary. It's an average, but it's almost that for everyone. And the amount of employer social security contribution is between 25% and 42%. But for almost, the salary, high salary is 42%. So if I give an example, very, stupid one, but it's easier to understand. If
Sure.
if the gross salary is 100, the employer will pay 132 euro. It's a global cost for the employer, and the employee will receive 78 euro before paying income tax.
Understood. That's very helpful. Thank you for the explanation with the example. Finally, we can finish our discussion in France talking about onboarding. Onboarding in France typically takes up to 5 days, and there are some mandatory elements involved during the onboarding process. Selene, if you could just mention what those mandatory requirements would be, that would be great.
Yes, please. So in the framework of Deel, we say that we need 5 days to onboard an employee, which is very mandatory. It's medical visit medical during the first 3 months of employment. So we organize for our employee this medical visit. At the same time, and I would like to underline the fact that it's very important to declare the employee at the start date, because otherwise it's considered in France as illegal employment. So I would like to underline the fact that employee must not work before the start date, and because failure to comply with this formality may result in criminal penalty for illegal employment. So when the employee begins, we need to register him to the social administration, and like that we are covered because we know that the employee is well registered.
Right. Okay. So that's what it means to declare an employee.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Salem. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share your knowledge with us. That was great, very, very insightful. Appreciate it. So
Thanks,
with
Pri.
that, we can, thank you. So with that, we can move on to a very high level overview of our Deel platform, which will give you an understanding of how everything that we just went through is managed within the platform seamlessly. All right, so let me share my screen for this. All right, so I hope my screen is visible. Sorry, I'm just trying to navigate around Hopin for the very first time. So this right here is the Deel dashboard for our audience who's never seen it before. Once you sign up for an account, it's as simple as going to our website and signing for an account. You will have access to this dashboard. And right here, you'll be able to manage all your employees, all your contractors, doesn't matter which country they're from. You're not going to have individual logins, but you manage everybody across the world, across different roles as contractors or employees in a single location. So right here, you will have your transaction history, when you've made payments, the payment amount, upcoming holidays, your international team member, the different countries your international team members are sitting at, and the number of people. And the important thing that I wanted to show in today's call is to talk about how you can create a contract itself. And this is essentially the first step to initiate the entire process. So as you can see, these three contracts, fixed rate, pay as you go, and milestone, would be for contractors when you're trying to engage with someone as an individual contractor, whereas this is for a full-time employee through the employer of record model. So for today, I'll just go through this example real quick. So when you're creating an employee contract, you're typically creating an employee profile. And all you have to do is input some basic information. So let's say I'll take my example, and let's say the nationality is France, and the employee will be working from France, so there is no work visa needed in this case. Next, you would have to choose your team, which team they're going to be working for. Let me say Deel Global, you choose your entity, I'll say Deel UK, and then you input some information about the job itself, right? So I'll say a mid-level account executive. So for work scope, we have some templates, but this is completely customizable. You can enter the job description as you wish. So for full-time employees, they get paid in their local currency, and here is where you input the salary. Now, based on the region and the salary and the level, you will also get some insights on the salary. So as you can see, this is the lowest that someone for this role is being paid in France, and what I'm paying is the highest. This is typically the market median, just for you to have a sense of how competitive your compensation is. And you can include additional elements like a signing bonus, a compensation plan, put in the start date, choose your employment type. Time off can never be below the standard, but you can go above if you as a company have policy to offer, let's say, X amount of days, maybe 30, you can do that. Right? So you input all this information and you hit on request a quote, and then the Deel team will get back to you in a couple of hours with a quote which gives you a complete breakdown of the payroll. And this would include the salary, the employer cost, the Deel management fee. If you're extending private healthcare through Deel, the cost of that. So you get a complete breakdown of the payroll amount that you will be processing on a monthly basis. All right. One other thing that I quickly want to touch upon is showing you how you can make payments or run payroll. It's as simple as clicking on a button, right? So right here on your dashboard, you'll be able to see the payments that are due. So today I have 14 payments due. I'm going to click on pay. And this is across 14 people, a combination of contractors and employees, and they're all getting paid in different currencies. As you can see, some in US dollars, some in euros, some in INR, some in Swedish krona. And the best thing about Deel is you're not going to be making 14 individual transfers, right, when you're taking care of your international team. But rather, you're going to make a single payment by transferring us the bulk amount or the mass amount for the entire payroll. right? So here you can see that's an example of $80,000. So all you have to do is click on continue, choose your payment method. Here we are quite flexible as well. We have ACH, we have bank transfer, we have integrations with payment providers like TransferWise and Mercury that you can make use of. You can also pay us in crypto through Coinbase, and we also accept payments in over 10 different currencies. That's it for today. I want to start with a very high level overview. We have additional elements like invoices and receipts for you to have a clear indication of all your invoices, all your payment receipts. You will have access to compliance documents of your contractors and employees, and many other things, right? So feel free to go to our website, request for a demo. We'll be happy to understand your requirements in detail, answer any questions that you have about hiring in any part of the world, and also give you an in-depth view of the platform. So what we've seen today is the view from a client side, right? But your employees and contractors will also have their own dashboard, which looks like this overall, but of course has different features. All right. Great. So with that, we're done with the demo. And now I'd like to bring it back to the slides. So let's move on to questions. We will now take questions from the audience and address it. Any questions for us?
Come on, guys, don't be shy. Let the questions flow.
Yeah. We have just 5 minutes left. Not sure if people are able to type in the questions.
Or maybe we answered everything perfectly.
Maybe. That would be the best case study. All right, we'll give it a couple of minutes. All right, we have a question here. This would be for the UAE team, I guess. How to hire a contractor in the UAE but not have him under my payroll? How can this be done?
I can take that. I'm a contractor by Deel, for Deel. So in the UAE, there are a lot of favorable setups for you to either set up as a freelancer, or you can set up your own company. And there's a lot of different ways that you can set up an entity. There's a lot of different free zone authorities that you can approach depending on what's fitting for your strategy. I myself, for example, have my own consulting firm, and I'd rather be on my own structure and my own visa and sponsor myself. So that's exactly going back to the points that we covered earlier on why the UAE is a really good place. It's not just from a corporate company side to sponsor their employees, but it's also for people who want to be here individually or to sponsor their own families and things like that. So it's the easiest thing to do. There are many different ways, and we can guide you accordingly. This is my domain. This is what I've been doing for the past couple of years. So this is where we can add value to you beyond just hiring compliantly. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you, Tarek. Thank you for taking that one. Next, we have a question from Ashish. It says, can we provide employees with bonuses or allowances? This is pretty simple. Karen, you want to take this one, or I'm happy to address it as well?
Yeah, or maybe Yonit can give us a bit more. I saw she wanted to. And the employees.
Go ahead, Yonit, please.
No problem. So using the platform, as we showed earlier, you can add adjustment to the employee salary. You can add bonuses. You can add allowances. So you can choose a monthly allowance. It will be recurring, or a one-time allowance. Our platform really gives you the opportunity to to give all the bonuses, allowances, any kind of adjustment if you need to change the salary, to increase the salary, or to add another benefits. So it's all done through our platform.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thanks, Unit. Thanks for taking that one. And next we have Bartendu Vimal. He says we hire freelance contractors globally. Is there a follow-up question? Not sure.
But perhaps commenting on that, you have multiple freelancers across many countries. That's exactly what Deel's value can be for you, right? So we make sure you guys are compliant. We make sure your contractors are being paid on time. Make sure they have the flexibility to withdraw in many different ways, and to make sure that they're also having peace of mind in terms of everything from invoicing, things like that. So it goes way beyond just focusing on the country. It cuts across many countries that we're operating in. That's exactly what we call.
Thanks, Tarek. Next, we have one from Thomas. It says, Karen mentioned that company is obligated to treat IC as full-time employee if the IC has worked for the company for over a period of time. Example, 24 to 36 months. Does EOR overcome this obligation? Karen, you want to take that one?
Yes, sure. Yes, it does, right? In many ways, it's just because then, as an employee of record, you are. That's why we talk a lot about compliance. Compliance is about that, to making sure that and have basically you're secure, right? So in terms of your employee, yes. So the short answer is yes.
Great, thank you. One last question we'll take for today, since we're almost on time. Can the employee bring his family into the UAE on visa sponsored by Deel? If yes, what is the process? Unit, Tarek, feel free to take it.
Yes, so yes, employees may sponsor his spouse and children, and the sponsorship of the family can happen only when his own work permit is approved. So in order to sponsor the family, the employee will need to present an attested marriage record for the spouse, and birth record attested as well for the children, for his children. In any case, our global mobility team will guide you and the employee throughout this process. So our global mobility team will take care of it.
Great, thank you, Leonid. And with that, it's time for us to wrap up. I would like to take this time to really thank our speakers for being here and sharing everything that you shared. It's been immensely helpful, appreciated. And for all the audience members who joined us today, we will follow up with some collateral on Deel and very useful information on hiring in the UAE, hiring in France, and feel free to go to our website, like I mentioned before, and our team will be happy to get on a call and help you with any requirement you have across the globe. Thank you very much, everybody. It was lovely catching up with all of you today. See you on the next webinar. Bye.
Thank you.